Back in 2014, out near the Cascades, I was 32 and raising my son Benny alone in a cabin off a gravel road that disappeared into the woods. Late September, the kind of weather where rain came down soft all night and left the ground smelling like wet pine and earth. We had bad reception, no neighbors for 3 miles, and I worked traplines to make enough for us both. Benny was 7 then, good kid, quiet like me. One afternoon, I came back from checking traps and found him gone. 3 knocks on the side of the cabin that evening, slow and deliberate, like someone asking permission. The smell hit me next, wet fur, sharp and wild. I still have the video on my phone from what happened after. I've never shown anyone. I thought the worst part would be the video. It wasn't. The afternoon Benny disappeared started normal enough. I was up before dawn, same as always, pulling on my boots in the kitchen while he slept in the back room. The cabin sat about 50 yards from the tree line, close enough that I could hear the forest waking up. Crows calling, wind moving through the pines. I made coffee, left a note on the table telling him to stay close, and headed out with my pack and knife. The trap line ran along the ridge about 2 miles north, a route I'd walked 100 times. The rain had stopped overnight, but everything was soaked through. Moss hung heavy on the branches. Water dripped from the canopy in a steady rhythm that sounded almost like footsteps if you weren't paying attention. I checked each trap, reset the ones that had been tripped by raccoons or possums, and worked my way back toward the cabin. By the time I got home, it was almost 1 in the afternoon. I called Benny's name from the porch. No answer. I went inside. His bed was made, the note still on the table, his jacket gone from the hook by the door. I figured he'd gone down to the creek like he did sometimes, looking for salamanders or stacking rocks. I wasn't worried yet. Not really. I walked down to the water, calling his name every few steps. The creek was running high from the rain, brown and fast over the stones. No sign of him. I checked the clearing where he liked to build forts out of fallen branches. Nothing. I walked back to the cabin and tried his name again, louder this time. The forest swallowed the sound. That's when the quiet started to feel wrong. The birds had stopped. The wind had died. Everything felt still, like the woods were holding their breath. I stood on the porch and listened, just the drip of water from the eaves and my own heartbeat in my ears. The afternoon sun was starting to dip behind the ridge, casting long shadows through the trees. I spent the next few hours searching in widening circles around the cabin. I told myself he couldn't have gone far. He was a smart kid, knew the woods well enough not to get turned around, but the light was fading and the temperature was dropping and I still hadn't found him. Around 4 o'clock I heard it. One knock, sharp and clear, coming from the direction of the ridge. I stopped walking and listened. It wasn't the sound of a branch falling or a woodpecker working on a tree. It was deliberate, like someone hitting wood with a rock. I waited. Nothing else came. I convinced myself it was nothing, maybe a hunter camming a trail, and kept walking. The sun was sinking lower now, turning the sky orange and pink above the tree line. Shadows stretched across the forest floor like dark fingers reaching toward me. My voice was hoarse from calling Benny's name. I went back inside and tried my phone. No signal, same as always. The nearest ranger station was 15 miles down the mountain, and the road washed out every winter. I'd have to drive there myself if I wanted help. I stood in the kitchen and tried to think. Benny had never done this before. He'd wandered off, sure, but never for this long. Never past the point where I started to panic. I grabbed my phone anyway, thinking maybe I could at least use the camera light if the sun went down completely before I found him, and went back out. That's when I heard the knocks again. 3 of them this time, spaced out evenly. Knock, knock, knock. Each one louder than the last. They came from somewhere up the ridge, maybe a 1/4 mile away. I stood there with my phone in my hand and tried to make sense of it. It wasn't an animal. Animals don't knock. It wasn't a person either, or they would have answered when I called out. I wanted to go back inside and lock the door, but Benny was out there somewhere. So I started walking toward the sound, moving as fast as I could while there was still light to see by. The woods felt different as the light faded. The trees pressed in closer, colors drained away, leaving everything in shades of gray and blue. I climbed the slope toward the ridge, slipping on wet leaves and grabbing at saplings to keep my balance. The air smelled like rain and rot and something else underneath it, something sharp and animal. I kept calling Benny's name, but my voice didn't carry the way it should have. The forest absorbed every sound. I stopped every few minutes to listen. No knocks now. Just silence and the drip of water and my own breathing. That's when I saw the footprint. I almost walked past it. The last rays of sunlight coming through the canopy caught the edge of it, pressed deep into the mud near a fallen log. I crouched down and stared. It was huge, at least 18 inches long and half that wide. 5 toes, clearly visible. The edges were sharp, like it had been made recently, maybe in the last few hours. I've seen bear tracks. I've seen elk tracks and cougar tracks and every other kind of print these woods can offer. This wasn't any of those. It was too big, shaped wrong. The toes were too long and the arch was too pronounced. It looked almost human, except no human foot is that big. I stood up slowly and looked around. More prints, leading up the ridge in a straight line, each one pressed deep into the soft ground. Whatever made them was heavy, walking upright. I felt my chest tighten. I'd heard the stories, same as everyone who lived out here. Loggers talking over beers about things they'd seen in the deep woods. Hikers who swore they'd heard voices where no one should be. I'd always written it off as bullshit, campfire tales. But here was the evidence, right in front of me. And Benny was still missing. I followed the prints up the ridge, my hands shaking. The light was almost gone now, the forest turning dark blue and purple. I pulled out my phone and turned on the camera, using it for light. The screen glowed bright in the gathering dusk. The prints led me up through a stand of old-growth cedar, trees so thick 3 men couldn't wrap their arms around them. The ground leveled out near the top of the ridge, and the prints disappeared into a stretch of rocky ground where nothing would leave a mark. I stood there breathing hard, holding my phone up to light the way forward. That's when I saw it. Just a shadow at first, standing between 2 trees about 30 yards ahead. I froze. The shadow didn't move. The sky behind it was still holding on to the last bit of twilight, just enough to see by. I raised my phone and the camera caught it. It was tall, taller than any man I'd ever seen, maybe 8 feet, maybe more, covered in dark hair that looked almost black in the fading light. Broad shoulders, long arms, standing perfectly still. I could see its face now, flat, wide, with eyes that caught what little light remained and reflected it back at me. My brain tried to make sense of it. A bear standing up, I thought. But bears don't stand that straight. Bears don't have shoulders like that. And then I saw Benny. He was in its arms, held against its chest the way you'd carry a sleeping child. He wasn't struggling. He wasn't crying. He was just looking up at it, calm as anything. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The creature, Bigfoot, I knew that's what it was even though I didn't want to say it, turned its head and looked directly at me. I could see its eyes clearly now, dark and intelligent. The air smelled like wet fur and something else, something earthy and wild. It didn't growl, didn't make any threatening gesture. It just stood there holding my son, and I stood there holding my phone, and the woods were absolutely silent around us. Then it took 1 step forward toward me, still cradling Benny gently. Benny turned his head and saw me. His face lit up. "Dad," he said. His voice sounded small but clear in the quiet. "I'm okay." My thumb hit the record button on my phone. I didn't even realize I was doing it. The creature took another step forward, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. I could see it clearly now in the dim twilight. Its fur was dark brown, almost black, matted in places from the rain. Its face was more human than ape, with a broad nose and a heavy brow. It watched me with those dark eyes, assessing, intelligent. I realized my phone was recording. My hand was shaking, but I kept it pointed at them. The creature didn't seem to mind. It took another step, close enough now that I could see the individual hairs on its arms, the way its massive chest rose and fell with each breath. "It's okay, Dad," Benny said. He sounded so calm. "It helped me. I fell and it picked me up." The creature made a sound then, low and rumbling, coming from deep in its chest. Not aggressive, almost gentle. It shifted Benny in its arms, adjusting its grip the way a parent would with a tired child. Then it knelt down, slowly, and set Benny on the ground. Benny stood there for a moment, looking up at it. The creature placed one enormous hand on top of his head, just for a second, almost like a blessing. Then it straightened up and looked at me again. We stared at each other across the 20 feet of forest floor that separated us. I should have been terrified. I should have grabbed Benny and run. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. I could see it in the creature's eyes, in the way it had carried my son, in the gentleness of that last gesture. It had saved him, found him when he was lost, kept him safe, and now it was bringing him back. "Thank you," I said. My voice came out as a whisper. The creature tilted its head slightly like it was listening. Then it took a step back, and another, moving backward into the darkening trees. Its eyes stayed on me the whole time. 3 steps, 4, and then it turned and was gone, disappearing into the forest without a sound. Benny ran to me and I dropped to my knees and pulled him into my arms. I was shaking. My phone was still recording, pointed at the empty space where Bigfoot had been standing. I held Benny for a long time, just breathing, feeling his warmth against me. The woods were getting darker by the minute. I could barely see the path back down the ridge. I stopped the recording on my phone and pocketed it, then picked Benny up and started walking. "Are you hurt?" I asked him. "No," he said. "I'm just tired." "What happened? Where did you go?" "I went up the creek," he said. "I wanted to see where it came from. But then I slipped on the rocks and fell down. I hurt my ankle and I couldn't walk good. That's when it found me." "Bigfoot?" He nodded against my shoulder. "It picked me up. It made sounds like it was saying it was okay. Then it started carrying me. I think it was bringing me home." I didn't know what to say to that. I just held him tighter and kept walking. By the time we made it back to the cabin, it was full dark. I set Benny down on the couch and checked him over. His ankle was swollen but not broken. He had scrapes on his hands and knees from the fall. Otherwise, he was fine. Better than fine. He seemed happy, excited even. "Did you see it, Dad? Did you see how big it was?" "I saw it," I said. "Are you going to tell anyone?" I thought. About that. The phone in my pocket felt heavy. I had footage, clear footage, shot in the last light of day, showing Bigfoot holding my son. It was the kind of evidence people had been looking for forever. It could change everything. "No," I said. "I don't think so." "Why not?" "Because it helped you," I said. "It saved you. And if I tell people, they'll come looking for it. They'll want to hunt it or catch it or study it. I don't want that." Benny thought about that for a moment. Then he nodded. "Okay," he said. "I won't tell either." We shook on it, right there in the living room, a pact between us. The secret of what happened on the ridge would stay ours. That night I sat on the porch after Benny was asleep. Around midnight I heard 3 knocks from somewhere up in the trees. Slow, deliberate, the same as before. I stood up and walked to the edge of the porch. "You're welcome," I said quietly. The next few days were strange. I thought about calling the ranger station, reporting that Benny had wandered off and come back on his own. But what would I say? That he'd been gone for 6 hours and returned unhurt? They'd ask questions. They'd want to know where he'd been, how he'd survived. And I'd already promised not to tell. So I didn't call anyone. Life just went back to normal. I worked the trap line. Benny played by the creek, though he didn't go as far upstream anymore. We ate dinner together, and he told me about the salamanders he'd found, and I told him about the raccoon that had gotten into one of my traps. But at night, alone, I watched the video. I must have played it 100 times in those first few days. The footage was better than I'd hoped. The light had been dim, but still enough to see by. You could clearly make out Bigfoot standing there, Benny in its arms. You could see the creature's face, its eyes, the way it moved. You could see it kneel down and set Benny on the ground. You could see that moment of contact, the hand on his head. It was proof. Real, undeniable proof that Bigfoot existed, and I was the only one who had it. I thought about what I could do with it, the money it could bring, the fame. I could sell it to news networks, to documentary filmmakers, to researchers. I could write a book, do interviews, become the guy who finally proved Bigfoot was real. But every time I thought about it, I remembered the way the creature had looked at me, those dark, intelligent eyes, the gentleness in its movements, the way it had returned my son instead of keeping him or hurting him. It had trusted me to be there, to take him back, to do the right thing. And the right thing, I realized, was to keep the secret. I moved the video to a locked folder on my phone and told myself I'd never share it. Some things weren't meant to be proven. Some things were meant to stay mysteries. Bigfoot had saved my son and asked nothing in return. The least I could do was protect it the way it had protected Benny. A week after the encounter, I found something on the porch rail, a small circle woven from pine boughs and grass, intricate and deliberate. I picked it up and turned it over in my hands. Benny came out and saw it. "It made that," he said. "How do you know?" "I saw it making one when it was carrying me." That's when I truly understood. Bigfoot wasn't just an animal. It was intelligent, creative, capable of making things. The woven circle was proof of that, just as real as the video I'd recorded. I kept it on my dresser, next to my wallet and keys, a reminder of what I'd seen and what I'd chosen to protect. The weeks turned into months. Autumn deepened into winter. The rain turned to snow, and the forest went quiet the way it does when everything's buried under white. I kept working the trapline, kept checking for tracks, kept listening for knocks in the night. Sometimes I heard them, 3 knocks, slow and evenly spaced, coming from somewhere in the trees. Sometimes I'd find things on the porch, another woven circle, a stack of smooth stones arranged in a careful pyramid, once a perfect bird skull cleaned and placed on the rail. I started leaving food out. Not every night, just sometimes. A sandwich, an apple, a piece of venison from a deer I'd taken. I'd set it on the rail, and in the morning it would be gone. Could have been raccoons or possums. Could have been anything. But I don't think it was. Benny started drawing pictures of Bigfoot, tall figures covered in dark fur, standing between trees or holding children in their arms. He never made a big deal out of it. It was just another subject to him, like the birds or the creek or the deer. When his teacher asked about the drawings, he'd say he was drawing a bear. She never questioned it. One night in December, I was sitting on the porch when I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming from the tree line. I stood up and looked into the darkness. The snow was falling softly, muffling every sound. I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. "I know you're there," I said quietly. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, from somewhere in the trees, a low sound. Not quite a voice, but not quite an animal either. Something in between. It raised the hair on the back of my neck, but I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. "Thank you," I said again, "for saving him, for watching over us." 3 knocks answered me. Slow, deliberate, the same as always. Then the footsteps resumed, moving away, fading into the snowy forest. I stood there for a long time after they'd gone, just listening to the silence and the soft whisper of falling snow. When I went back inside, Benny was awake, standing at the window. "Was it here?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. He smiled. "Good," he said, and went back to bed. Spring came, and with it a decision I'd been putting off. The cabin was too isolated. Benny needed to be in school, around other kids. He needed a life that didn't revolve around the woods and the trapline and the creature that lived somewhere up on the ridge. So I started looking for places closer to town. Small houses with yards and neighbors and sidewalks. I didn't tell Benny at first. I didn't know how to explain it without making it sound like we were running away. But one day he saw me looking at listings on my phone, and he asked if we were moving. "Maybe," I said. "Would that be okay?" He thought about it. "Will it be mad? Will it think we don't want to be here anymore? It took me a second to realize he meant Bigfoot. No, I said. I think it'll understand. You're getting older. You need to be around people. Can we come back and visit? Yeah, I said. We can come back. We moved that summer. A small house on the edge of town, close enough to schools and stores, but still near the woods. Benny adjusted faster than I thought he would. He made friends, joined the soccer team, started acting like a normal kid. But sometimes I'd catch him looking out at the trees behind the house with a distant expression, like he was remembering something. I went back to the cabin once, a few months after we'd moved. I drove up the gravel road and parked in the clearing and sat there for a while, just looking at the place. It looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile. The forest had already started to reclaim it, blackberry vines creeping up the porch rails, moss growing thick on the roof. I got out and walked up to the porch. There was something on the rail, another woven circle, fresh and green, made from new growth pine boughs. I picked it up and turned it over in my hands. Still watching, I thought. Still here. I left a whole bag of apples on the rail and walked back to my truck. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew Bigfoot was there somewhere, in the trees, watching me leave. The same way it had watched over Benny. The same way it had been watching over both of us all along. That night, back in the new house, I heard 3 knocks. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Benny was already asleep. I stood at the window and looked out at the woods behind the house. Nothing moved in the darkness, but I knew. Bigfoot had followed us, or maybe there were more of them than I'd thought. Either way, we weren't alone. Years passed. Benny grew up. The cabin became a distant memory, something we'd talk about occasionally but never visited again. He graduated high school, started thinking about college. The drawings of Bigfoot stopped. He didn't talk about that day on the ridge anymore. When I asked him about it once, a few years after we'd moved, he said he remembered it, but it felt like a dream, something that had happened to someone else. I understood. That's how memory works. The sharp edges get worn down. The impossible becomes possible, then probable, then just another story you tell yourself. But I had the video. I still have it. And every few months I watch it again, just to remind myself that it was real, that Bigfoot exists, that it saved my son. I started researching more seriously, late nights on my laptop, reading through forums and websites dedicated to Bigfoot sightings. Most of it was garbage. People making up stories for attention, posting obviously fake photos, claiming they'd been abducted or chased or attacked. But some of it rang true. The details matched what I'd experienced. The 3 knocks, the smell, the woven gifts, the intelligence. I found a post from a woman in Oregon who said Bigfoot had returned her lost daughter. Same story. Child wandered into the woods, parents panicked, search party organized. The girl turned up the next morning at the edge of the forest, unhurt, claiming a big hairy man had kept her warm through the night. Everyone dismissed it as a fantasy, something the girl had invented to cope with being lost and scared. But I knew she was telling the truth. I wanted to reach out to her, to tell her I believed her, that the same thing had happened to us. But I didn't. I'd made a promise to keep the secret, and I intended to keep it. So I just read her story and closed the browser and went to check the backyard. There was a stack of stones near the fence, 7 of them, balanced perfectly on top of each other. Too deliberate to be random, too careful to be kids playing. I took a photo of it with my phone and added it to the folder where I kept the video and all the other pictures I'd taken over the years. Woven circles, stacked stones, a handprint in the mud that was too big to be human. Evidence, real evidence, but evidence I'd never share. Because sharing it would mean betraying the trust Bigfoot had placed in me when it returned my son. And I won't do that. I can't. Some promises are too important to break. Benny's 17 now, getting ready for college. We live in a regular neighborhood with regular neighbors and regular problems. He doesn't remember much about the cabin or the woods or the day he got lost. When I bring it up, he just shrugs and says it was a long time ago. He's focused on the future, scholarships, applications, what he wants to study, normal teenage stuff. But I remember everything. The way Bigfoot stood there in the fading light, holding my son so gently, the intelligence in its eyes, the trust it showed by bringing Benny back to me, instead of running deeper into the forest, the gifts it left on the porch, the 3 knocks in the night. I still hear them sometimes, even here, 40 miles from the cabin, in a neighborhood with streetlights and paved roads. I'll be sitting on the back porch late at night and I'll hear them. 3 slow knocks from somewhere in the dark. Could be someone working on their house. Could be a branch hitting a fence. Or it could be Bigfoot, reminding me it's still out there, still watching, still protecting us in its own way. I think about going back sometimes, driving up to the old cabin, walking the ridge, leaving food on the porch rail. But I don't. That part of my life is over. Benny's got a future ahead of him, and I'm not going to drag him back into the woods to chase something most people don't believe exists. But I know what I saw. I know what saved my son. And I know that somewhere out in the Cascades, in the deep woods where people don't go, Bigfoot is still there, still weaving circles from pine boughs, still stacking stones, still knocking 3 times when it wants to be heard. I keep the video locked away on my phone. Sometimes I think about deleting it, letting go of the only proof I have, but I can't. It's the evidence that everything I remember actually happened, that Bigfoot is real, that my son was saved by something people think is a myth or a joke or a hoax. The video is poor quality, shot in dim light with shaking hands, but you can see everything that matters. Bigfoot standing there, Benny in its arms, the moment it knelt down and set him on the ground, the gentle touch of its hand on his head, the way it looked at me before it walked away. I'll never show it to anyone. That's a promise I made 10 years ago, and I intend to keep it. Some things are meant to stay secret. Some encounters are meant to be remembered, not proven. Last month, Benny asked me about the cabin. We were having dinner, and out of nowhere he said, "Do you remember that place we used to live? Up in the mountains?" "Yeah," I said. "I remember." "Did something happen there? Something we don't talk about?" I looked at him. He was almost grown now, taller than me, with his mother's eyes and my stubborn streak. "Why do you ask?" "I had a dream," he said. "I was little, and I was lost in the woods, and something found me. Something big. It wasn't scary, though. It was safe. Like it was trying to help." My throat tightened. "What do you think it was?" He shrugged. "I don't know. It felt real. But it couldn't have been real, right?" I could have told him then. Could have pulled out my phone and shown him the video. Could have explained everything. The search, the fear, the moment I saw Bigfoot carrying him through the woods. Could have told him about the gifts and the knocks and the promise I'd made to keep it all secret. But I didn't. He had a life now. Friends, plans, a future that didn't include the woods and the creature that lived there. He didn't need to carry that weight. So I just smiled and said, "Dreams can feel real sometimes." He nodded and went back to his dinner, and we didn't talk about it again. But that night I pulled out my phone and watched the video one more time. 10 years old now, the footage grainy and dark, but still clear enough, still proof, still real. I think about Bigfoot out there in the wilderness, living its life away from people and cameras and hunters. I wonder if it remembers us. I wonder if it ever thinks about the day it saved a lost boy and brought him back to his father. I wonder if it knows I kept my promise, that I never told anyone, that I protected its secret, the way it protected my son. Sometimes late at night I'll stand at the back window and look out at the woods and whisper, "Thank you," into the darkness. I don't know if it can hear me from this far away. But I say it anyway. Because gratitude doesn't have a distance limit. Because some debts can never be repaid. because Bigfoot gave me back my son when it could have done anything else. And that's worth more than proof. Worth more than fame or money or being the guy who finally proved Bigfoot was real. It's worth everything. Last night I heard the knocks again. 3 of them, slow and deliberate, coming from the woods behind the house. I was sitting on the porch in the dark, couldn't sleep, just watching the stars. The knocks were faint, but unmistakable. That same rhythm, that same deliberate spacing. I stood up and walked to the edge of the porch. The woods were dark, just a wall of black beyond the reach of the porch light. I couldn't see anything, but I could smell it, that wild smell. Wet fur and cedar and earth. The smell I'd first caught 10 years ago on the ridge. "I know you're there," I said quietly. "I know it's you." Silence. Just the sound of wind in the trees and my own breathing. Then, from somewhere deep in the woods, a low sound. Not quite a voice, but not quite animal. Something in between. Something that made my skin prickle and my heart beat faster even though I wasn't afraid. "Thank you," I said, "for everything, for saving him, for watching over us, for trusting me." 3 more knocks, softer this time, almost gentle, like an acknowledgement, a "you're welcome" spoken in a language without words. Then silence again. I stood there for a long time, just listening, just breathing the night air. When I finally went back inside, Benny was standing at the top of the stairs. "Did you hear it?" he asked. "Hear what?" "The knocking." I looked at him. "You heard it too?" He nodded. "I've been hearing it for a while now." I didn't want to say anything. I thought maybe I was imagining it. He paused. "It's real, isn't it? What happened when I was little? It really happened." "Yeah," I said. "It really happened." He came down the stairs and stood next to me at the window. We looked out at the dark woods together. "Do you think it's still out there?" he asked. "I know it is. Why did it save me?" "I don't know," I said. "Maybe because you needed help. Maybe because that's just what it does. Maybe because it's not the monster people think it is." We stood there for a while longer, father and son, sharing a secret we'd kept for 10 years. Then Benny went back to bed and I sat down at the kitchen table and pulled out my phone. The video was still there in the locked folder, right where it had always been. I watched it one more time. Bigfoot standing in the fading light, my son in its arms, that moment of trust and gentleness and grace. Then I put the phone down and went to the window one last time. The woods were quiet. Now, no knocks, no sounds, just darkness and trees and the smell of night air. But I knew Bigfoot was out there somewhere, knew it would always be out there, living its life in the deep places where humans don't go, occasionally reaching out to remind us it's real. I don't say the name out loud much anymore, don't need to, but when I do, when I'm alone in the dark and I whisper Bigfoot into the silence, I swear I can feel it. A presence watching from the shadows. Not threatening, not scary. Just there, just aware. Just reminding me that some things in this world are bigger than proof, stranger than science, more important than being believed. And that's enough. That's all I need. 3 knocks in the night. A smell on the wind. The memory of my son safe in those massive arms. The knowledge that I kept my promise and protected something precious and rare. The rest of the world can believe what it wants. I know the truth. I always will.